Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Greg Doyle. I'm a director on the Global Mining and Metals Investment Banking team at National Bank, and I'm pleased to be here to moderate the next segment of the Producer, Royalty Company, and Developer session. So our first company that we're going to hear from in this segment is Nations Royalty. Nations Royalty is a growing royalty company focused on acquiring and managing cash-generating royalties across North America. So without further ado, please help me welcome Sam Brezden, External Relations for Nations Royalty Corp.
Thank you. How are we doing today? Everyone enjoy their lunch? Awesome. Like he said, my name is Sam Brezden. I'm the External Relations Manager for Nations Royalty. I'm also Métis and Cree from the James Cree First Nation. And my mom is Dutch, for those of you that look confused. We have a brief legal disclaimer here. I'm going to trust that you are all very fast readers, and we will just kind of flow through that one. So the mining royalty business model is not a new one. It's been around for a few decades. I'm sure you've heard of a few of these, like Franco-Nevada and Wheaton Precious Metals. It is a fabulous business model because they collect mining royalties, and investors love them. And why do investors love them? It's because you get to partake in the upside of these mines that are producing without taking on a lot of the risk, right? So we have a diversification of assets. So if a mine shuts down, you're still going to be collecting dividends off of these funds. So it's a low operating risk, and it's also a highly scalable business. So these companies are continuing to generate revenue, and lots of it, while keeping a fairly small team. Just because you're acquiring more royalties doesn't mean that you have to keep growing your team, which keeps your operating costs low. So what's difficult about this model is that because it's so good, it's fairly competitive. So you'll see that a lot of these really great royalties are kind of taken on by some of these bigger royalties companies, because those assets are producing, and they're producing well. So having good assets that are producing well in safe political jurisdictions, finding new ones, it's difficult, right? But where are there still good royalties that are not in funds yet? Those are the funds owned by Indigenous communities. And why couldn't any of these larger companies get access to these royalties? Because these Indigenous communities aren't really wanting to partner with them, for many reasons we won't really touch on today. However, now we have an Indigenous-owned royalty company that's able to have these conversations with Indigenous communities, and they're kind of willing to sit down at the table and explore what this might mean for their community.
You want to watch. The growth opportunity that's available to us that is not available to other royalty companies is immense. The company is a certain size today with one nation. There's over 150 nations across this country, and then we look in the States as well and other parts of the world, but there's more than enough in this country.
Royalty companies have been the crown jewel of the mining space. Royalty companies are the largest mining companies in Canada. They don't operate mines, they just collect the revenue from them.
Huge opportunities for Canada to actually untap that wealth that exists within Indigenous nations.
The term economic reconciliation, this is a good example of what that can mean for people.
Nations Royalty will continue to grow. It's the first ever major Indigenous-owned public company.
Most startup royalty companies don't have nearly the quality of the portfolio that we have. We have an excellent location for royalties in British Columbia, a very well-established mining jurisdiction. To have 2 out of 4 or 5 royalties in the production status is quite remarkable.
These companies are loved by investors. Okay, let's float their royalties in a public company, but with a difference. Let's invite Indigenous groups pooling the royalties together.
All of the chiefs said we're stronger working together as one. So they threw all of their resources, all of their lands and resources in what we call a common bowl.
And then Frank Gistra, the man who moves things. There's an opportunity. The opportunity is to create something very, very, very large and very, very valuable. Someone who is willing to offer his knowledge. Now they can use that value to create other economic development in their communities. And I'm sure they have lots and lots of ambitions, and their main ambition is to be independent.
Nations Royalty is one step towards that, true independence.
How can we work with other First Nations to start amassing royalties to say this is what it can mean to us if we have access to this much capital?
The companies that have higher quality, more robust portfolios with many assets, they trade at the higher multiples, can be as high as 2 times net asset value.
The company gets bigger through the acquisition of more agreements, its valuation gets bigger, and then big institutions that don't invest in smaller companies will see it as a viable investment opportunity.
We're the largest holders of the shares of Nations Royalties right now. When it starts to grow, our ownership of that is going to shrink, but it's going to be a good thing. Everybody else that has put in their resources or buying into that are going to be beneficiaries just like us.
We wish to grow Nations Royalties into a multi-billion-dollar company. The path is there, and we're assembling the team that's going to make that happen.
Anybody joins with us, they're going to be just like us and celebrating a huge wealth, if you will. Who doesn't want that?
Well, that was way more dramatic than me talking about it, isn't it? So like I said, we are the first movers in the last untapped royalty space. Being an Indigenous-owned company and operated company, we're able to have that competitive advantage when talking to Indigenous groups about investing their royalty. We have access to Tier 1 assets in Tier 1 jurisdictions. And we truly think that we're on the tangible path to be the top royalty company in the world. Don't take it from me. I'm sure a lot of you know the guy on the left there, Frank Justra, who is a major shareholder of Nations Royalty and the CEO of the Fiore Group. Charles Morvan from the Nisga'a government. The Nisga'a has a vision to create Nations Royalty because they need to have about $8 billion assets under management in order to be completely independent of government transfer payments. And he believes that Nations Royalty is going to be the way to do that. So who created Nations Royalty? The Nisga'a government, who is a very progressive nation in the northwest of BC. They also happen to have very powerful five very powerful assets in their territory, and they have ended in all 5 of those royalty payments, IBA payments, into Nations Royalty. Co-created with us, the Fiore Group, who are financial market leaders, and they created Nations Royalty in order to leverage those IBA payments in the public markets. So who do we have in our portfolio so far? Like I said, on the Nisga'a territory, there's 5 big hitters, right? So we have Newmont with the Bruce Jack mine, which is producing about 300,000 ounces of gold a year. We have Premier and Red Mountain, owned by Ascot Resources, which are both supposed to be producing in September, and KSM and Kitsault. And KSM, as I'm sure you know, is one of the world's top producing copper gold assets. So in the last 40 years, any mine that has been permitted has been required to have an impact benefit agreement with the Indigenous community on which they're operating on. As you can see, there's a lot of them. And from 2017 to 2023, the amount of payments has gone up 129%. So just in 2023, there was $351 million paid out to Indigenous communities in IBAs. If you add in oil and gas, that's almost close to $1 billion that was paid just in 2023. And Sean in the last panel was talking about increasing capacity in Indigenous communities, and that's happening. And it's happening in the fact that Indigenous communities are now understanding the upside of these mines that are operating on their territory, and they're just getting a little bit more knowledge around, really, if they're assuming the risk by having these mines on their territory, they should also be participating in the upside of that. And we think that this is a great opportunity for communities to then use some of those payments to participate in the public markets, because until now, that hasn't been a conversation. So what did we do in 2024? We completed our IPO, raising about $10 million and listed on the TSX in June 2024. We've created the largest Indigenous-owned public company. Right now, Nisga'a is 77% shareholder. We are currently engaging with about 60 different Indigenous communities across the country. And something that we're doing is free of charge. We're helping Indigenous communities who are able to open up those IBA contracts and look at the payments they're having. And with the knowledge that we bring from the Fiore Group, we're able to take a look at those and see if they're fair. quite often they're not. Quite often they're fixed payments that were kind of told that they were going to get years ago, and it's really not a fair exchange. So we're meeting with groups. We have many that are under CA, so we're able to kind of see some of these assets that have multiple communities on those IBAs. We're able to see what one of the communities are getting and able to help the other one get that. So that's looking like NSR top-line royalty payments. So mining companies don't love us. However, it's time that Indigenous communities have access to those numbers and be able to peek behind the curtains and really see that upside that it's now time that they get to participate in. So who are we? Primarily Indigenous run now. We have Robert McLeod, who's our CEO, interim CEO until we find an Indigenous one. His story is he actually comes from the Northwest BC and had family ties to the Nisga'a. So that was kind of the tie between Frank Justra and the Nisga'a Nation, as Rob started that conversation as he saw what a great opportunity it is for those communities. Derek Patton is our CIO. He's from the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte. Josh Kearse, who's our CFO, is Métis. Cody Penner, I'm sure you've seen him around. He's our VP of Corporate Development and from the Tahltan First Nation. Myself, and Stephanie. And Stephanie, we're talking about developing capacity. She is from the Nisga'a Nation, and she's been able to step in to be our corporate secretary. So we've actually had another corporate secretary in the Fiore group who's been able to kind of walk her through how that looks and really help develop that capacity on her end. We got some heavy hitters on our board of directors, like I said, Rob McLeod, Alex Morrison, who was the founding CFO of Franco-Nevada, and Saga Williams, who's a lawyer from Curve Lake, Edward Clayton, who's also from the Nisga'a Nation, and we're looking to appoint one more Nisga'a appointee. And in our next partnership, if it's another majority shareholder, we're looking to put more Indigenous people on our team and the board of directors. And our advisors, again, all heavy hitters from the Fiore group. We have Frank Justra, Sean Kuhn, Ryan Waymark, and Gord Keep. So here's our current capital structure. We have 145 million shares outstanding. 77% of those are owned by the Nisga'a Nation, leading about 30 million. And our share price is about 50 cents. You'll see we're trading at a bit of a discount right now, as a lot of people are waiting to see when we're going to make that next partnership. And going back to when I was talking about capacity for Indigenous communities, we're finding when we're going to talk to Chief Council and community that there's a big educational component to what we're doing, right? Because when I say we're the first Indigenous-owned publicly traded company, I kind of get a blank stare, because they're like, great, what does that mean? Why should we care, right? Which is cool, it's exciting, right? Because I think that it's awesome that we're at this point, that we are going to community and talking about these things, and even the career opportunities in the public market. So it's a learning curve for them and for us, but it's starting there. And then working with Indigenous communities is not a typical bank transaction, right? It's building trust. It's showing up in community and being there for what they need and kind of walking through this journey together. So we are, like I said, in conversation with many, many groups, some with very, very exciting assets in our country and some of the best royalty payments you could think of, but it takes time. It won't be forced. It'll happen. We don't want any community members to think that they're being forced to do this decision. So having said that, there are investors kind of waiting to see if we can pull it off, and we will. And it's going to be exciting because it's going to be communities from across the country, which we've also never seen before. So that's it from me. If you have any questions, feel free to come find me after. Enjoy the rest of the conference.